We're excited that you're here, and we'll get ready in a moment for a great conversation.
Very nice.
Yeah, that was fun. That's a new addition to our netcast for all of you who are joining us today. A little creativity and flow and music. So Laura and Dave Butler here, and we have a very special guest in between the two of us, who happens to be our son.
One of my favorite people.
What did you say?
Good morning.
Yeah. Who happens to be an expert in recruitment and works for an organization named Medics. And I thought the best thing to do is just have you, Jeff, jump right in and introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the invite. I was excited. I've been keeping track of the Facebook Live events, and I thought I could definitely provide a little bit of insight from my career and the work that I've been doing since the onset of COVID last year. My background, I work for an organization called Medics. We're a national healthcare recruiting company. We have 20 offices across the nation, and I've been leading our San Diego office for the last couple of years, and now I'm moving into a regional director role with our health system clients in California.
All of California.
All of California, and then I have a few other states that are in my purview, but my main focus is California.
Cool.
Well, and as we all know, we have been dealing with change that is unprecedented, and we know because we talk all the time. But in your field, initially helping organizations with all of the testing that needed to take place, that was like trying to get everything ready within a day.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Tell us about how some of the recruiting businesses changed for you in the last couple of years.
Sure. Well, I mean, in general, I think from a temporary resource perspective, I think a lot of people look at staffing and recruitment as something that they don't really do or they don't want to work with. But the reality is that temporary resources and staff augmentation is completely on the rise and has been for the last 8 to 10 years, and it's not slowing down. The reality is that a lot of these recruiting companies are seeing unprecedented growth because of unprecedented change in the industries that we support. So from a healthcare perspective, all the way into life science companies, the fact that there's so much change, they need companies that can help them meet that change and accelerate how they bring talent into their organization. So we've seen tremendous growth in general, but specifically to COVID, for Medics, for our team, we've almost tripled in revenue since the onset of COVID. And the reason being is, what Mom, you just mentioned, is the occupational health space, but also the reality of the new world of work. There are a lot of organizations that don't want to have a large full-time employment of staff, and they'd rather use a temporary resource or a contract labor organization like us, because there's so much uncertainty on their end as well. They don't know that they're going to have the revenue to pay for an FTE for the rest of the year, let alone into the future. So that's some of the reasons why we're seeing so much growth. But it's been, like I said, unprecedented in terms of the growth we've seen, and then also the kind of projects that we're kind of supporting now. Used to be 10, 20 person projects. Now we're seeing upwards of 300 people projects.
Well, I thought one of the things that was interesting is early on, one of the pivots for you was to go and find people to take temperatures at some of the larger employers, because they were trying to deal with the situation. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that was something that we didn't know before. If you would have asked us in March of last year what it looks like, you would have gotten some very worry-heavy statements from us, because we don't know. And we would have seen a lot of our business subject to possibly going away, because we have a lot of work that we do with business offices around the nation. And when those things go remote or they furlough that staff, that's our bread and butter kind of going out the window. But what we noticed is that the occupational health space has been such a need for organizations that we historically might not have worked with. Large manufacturing operations, healthcare organizations that have a necessity to continue operations. That's where the first projects that we had was basically doing all the temporary temperature checking for that facility. And then that moved into contact tracing and then on-site testing. And now we're moving into vaccination. So it's been this kind of snowball effect that started with the temperature screening and now has gone into vaccinations. But to speak to what our topic is here about that accelerated change, we just said, okay, well, let's give it a shot. We didn't really know what we were doing at the time, but now we're in a situation where we're hitting milestones that we never even dreamed of as an organization, because I think the culture that we have at Medics is one of accepting change, right? We kind of live in that space of you need a project done next week, and you don't see any possible way of it ever happening, but that's what we do. So it's the culture of the organization and the kind of the feeling of never giving up in the face of this kind of mounting uncertainty that we were looking at in March of last year. So
I think that's a good attitude for all of us to take in the face of change.
Exactly.
And I'm wondering too, the people that you speak with, not only the clients who are looking for people, but the candidates, how are they dealing with all of this? Are they like fearful? Or are they ready to embrace the change?
I think it depends on who you're talking to. I think that's good feedback for everybody in general, is that it really is about your mindset, right? Is there some managers that I talk to where it's all doom and gloom and this is never going to end and I don't have any ability to do anything. And then there are other managers that I speak with that obviously have a good perspective on everything that's going on. They see it for what it is. They know it's not going to be forever. And they see the value, I think, in having conversations about forward, what are we going to do moving forward? How are we going to be prepared for when things go back to normal, as opposed to being so, I guess, stuck in the fear, the fear basis of what they're doing for decision making, as opposed to trying to think optimistically about what they could do right now.
Wait and see, wait and see, wait and see, wait and see. Pretty soon all you're doing is waiting.
Yeah, exactly. I think we talked about it, right? Is the paralysis by analysis. Everyone's trying to think, well, once COVID gets, normalized, then I'll go do this, or I'll make that career change, or I'll go back to school once COVID's over. But I think the reality is that the candidates that are effective right now are the ones that are taking the initiative and not waiting. They might be lacking some skills. They might not have everything on the job description, but they're at least willing to go and apply and put themselves out there. We've seen a number of people get opportunities that maybe they were underqualified for, but they were the only ones that were actually applying to the position. So they got hired.
So they get a chance to go get the skills.
Exactly.
Well, this is an interesting comment. I'm going to put this on. This is from Growth Coach Group. Change, always and forever. How lucky are we to know the change master, Dave? So without soliciting that, very, very interesting. So, but that's absolutely true. We have seen this going on now. And I think the point of being prepared for that comeback, whatever that comeback is, because the world of work, as you said, Jeff, has considerably changed. Nothing about the way it used to be is being written now. It's all McKinsey research, Deloitte research, looking at the future of work as we know it is going to be very different.
We have a link to a McKinsey article in today's broadcast and blog that talks about the trends and what that's going to look like 2021 and forward. A lot of the smarter people than me talking about what there is going to be happening.
Yeah, and the other thing I saw today on LinkedIn, a colleague of ours posted, I wish I had this book 20 years ago, and it was William Bridges' Transition. And so the whole idea, change happens. I mean, we're all undergoing change every single day, but it's everybody deals with that transition to get to the change in a very different way. So,
well, on that topic, Mom, it's kind of bringing me to a point I was thinking about making is I think the other piece that's made people effective during COVID is getting in touch with yourself and figuring out, how to manage yourself in these situations where people are now working from home. Myself as a perfect example, it's a different situation. I had an office here in San Diego where I had teammates that I would go and work with every day. And I'd leave my house, I would drive to work, I come back, and then my house is my relaxing place. To turn your house or apartment, which is historically the most relaxing place in your life, to then the area that has to be most productive, I think is a real challenge for anyone working remotely. And for me in particular, what helped was an understanding of my own stress and needs behavior specific to the Berkman. Of course, I'm a little bit biased coming from a background with YouTube, but that knowledge and I guess acceptance of where I'm strong and where I might not be. That didn't happen overnight. It's been 7 months, 8 months now, and I'm finally feeling like, okay, I've really got this down now. But I think that's important for everybody to start to look at is, where are you most effective? How do you capitalize on the things that you are effective in doing working remotely? And then how do you mitigate some of the things like distractions or busy work or feeling like you're really busy by just moving things around in your desk for an hour and a half? That I think is another area that people can focus on for their own productivity and then subsequently their career advancement.
Yeah, you have to put up a little sign that says the recruiter is in.
Exactly. Yeah. And
you're on now,
Yep. And I think just some food for thought for candidates as well is that the, video interviewing is the way forward now. That's the way organizations are doing the interview selection process. Phone screens are okay, but I think that the video interview, I push my clients to do video interviews because it's the best we can do right now outside of an in-person interview. And the phone interview is okay, but the video interview, I think, is where candidates are actually securing offers. And something to think about there is to be as professional as you can, but realize that you're working from home. So there's been a few situations where we've had candidates we're talking to and, a dog barks in the background or their kid screams or what have you, and it completely flusters everything that they're doing. And you can see that stress take hold, like, oh my gosh, you weren't supposed to hear that. The reality is that recruiters are aware that everyone's working from home now, or a large percentage of people are working remotely. So it's okay, right? There are certainly things that we can understand, but first and foremost is being presentable, right? Is to look the part when you do show up for the interview, but also know that some of the things that happen being in a remote work environment are okay during the interview process and not get so flustered during the conversation that it eventually leads us to not feel comfortable with the candidate because they're all over the place after that.
Maintain the professionalism. And of course, what you're doing in the video interview is showing them, if you continue to work at home, that you're able to handle it. I mean, it may be just, it's not necessarily getting a job where you're going to go someplace. If you're going to work at home, I want you to see how professional I can be at home.
Yeah. Yeah. And something else on that topic too is, what we're seeing from current customers is a little bit of a hybrid model where staff will come in for training for a week or two in a socially distanced environment on site, and then they'll be given the tools to move off site and work remotely. So something that candidates should be aware of is there might be a requirement still for organizations to ask you to come in and have that training done because there are certain things that they can't train when you're at home.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, I remember early on, there were a lot of videos that, getting ready on Zoom and then having cats walk across the keyboard, and
exactly.
It happens everywhere. And I think the more that we in this scrappy world, the more that we show our human side, the more real we are. And that's what everybody needs right now. Certainly David knows, our big program is emotional mastery, key to your leadership impact. And what's happening is that people are losing that mastery, or maybe are searching for it. How do I become a master of my emotions, or master mistress? Everybody needs to take a look at it, because myself included, I can go down the rabbit hole and hours later come back out. So we have to stay in touch with us.
Interesting. I was just talking with one of my oldest clients that I've been working with off and on since the 90s. And he said that one of the things that he did recently was pick up the old Dan Goleman book on emotional intelligence and start rereading parts of it, because it's become even more, 20 years later, it's no longer just an idea. It's a day-to-day situation that you need to have those kind of skills to maintain connection, to build connection, to find new ways to communicate with people that you never see. How do you read them? How do you get good at being able to tell your client, where they're at, but even more important is the candidate themselves. Where they're at.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just to talk at a high level as well about that kind of self-knowledge, specific to the Berkman report, we at Medix have our own assessment that we utilize for staff, and we see the value in it. Now, it's not nowhere near as in-depth as the Berkman is, but it allows our customers to see a little bit about who they're hiring. So that is super important. But I also feel like the the knowledge that it gives to each candidate, even though it's a very high level approach, just to give some self-awareness of who they are and what might they like or the things that stress them out, has been valuable for our organization. But I think now in the remote work area, it's important to look at the personality profiles, especially in hiring, so that you know who you're getting, and how effective they're going to be in the team. Because without that in-person interaction and that day-to-day kind of touch point, it's hard to know that unless you actually have that kind of information given to you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's really interesting stuff. I admire the work that you've done out there in the last couple of years. And, this is an area, and I know we've talked about it in the past, this whole conversation around talent and the changing world of work, and understanding how companies are going to be reconfiguring themselves is critical to people being successful and finding their way in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I think, number one, I want to thank you for inviting me on, and it was great to put some thoughts into this and kind of re-examine what's happened over the last year and a half and say, okay, well, what can we learn from this? And just a few key kind of quick hitters to end with. If anyone is in career transition or career search, a few just suggestions that I had is that never forget about the power of networking. Even in the situation that we're in right now with remote work and COVID, now might actually be one of the best times to reach out to individuals and grow your network, because there's so many people that are in a similar situation that even for me personally, I'm able to grow my network pretty effectively on LinkedIn, just by being humble and explaining that I'm interested in getting somebody's thoughts on what the return to work looks like or any of the topics. So if anyone's in career search, first and foremost is, who you know and what you know are the two most important things. So continuing to network while you're looking for a new opportunity or between opportunities is super important. And then the other piece too is to update your resume with current projects or things you've done over COVID that highlight your effectiveness in remote work, as opposed to just banking on what you did prior to COVID. Now I think it's hyper important to take an accounting of what you've done over the last year or 7 months, and really have that up to date on your resume. If you do get in a situation with an interview, you're able to explain that very effectively, because that's the area that companies really want to know is what you've been doing now to keep abreast with your skills and know what's going on. So just those 2 points.
What have you been doing to be prepared for the comeback?
Exactly. Yeah. So I thought those 2 points were just something to think about in case anyone is in career transition right now. And I'm happy to help anyone if that is the case too.
And your contact is Jeff at?
jbutler@medixteam.com. And I am on LinkedIn constantly. So if anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, reach out. I'd be happy to do a resume review, talk strategy about career search, all that kind of stuff.
I'm sure it's possible for you to even recruit people that are no longer local, because they're going to be remote anyway.
It's one of the hidden benefits of COVID is that skill sets and positions that we have historically struggled on stand to benefit from remote work. Because if we can get somebody, for instance, I have a client in Roseville, California, which is not necessarily a hub for medical billing and collections folks. We used to struggle a lot on that requisition, and now we have somebody working from Los Angeles at the Roseville office remotely, and they've got the perfect experience for what they need. So there are certainly areas that have still benefited, but nonetheless, it's a challenge.
Well, what a great conversation. We'll have to have you back, Jeff, and
Please.
tell us what's going on as who knows how things may evolve over the next several months. So we'll stay in touch, of course. And we'll get you in on another broadcast. So I think that would be great. But thank you, everybody. Yep. Either you're joining us live or you're listening into the recording. As always, thank you for joining. And we're here every Wednesday. The timing may change, but we'll be here. So thanks for seeing it.